Well, thank you, Dagmar. Thank you for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me to Sydney to give this talk. Actually, as you mentioned, I'm here to open Harry Sadler's exhibition, which is called Painting Toward Architecture, and I will talk a little bit more about this exhibition a little later. I'll show you one slide. And well, for me, curating is all about initiating projects. So, for example, I am here to open an exhibition which opened last weekend. And for me, it would be, I would say, a lost opportunity to come from New York directly to Sydney just to open an exhibition. It's a long trip. And so what I did, I initiated a project which was to do a lecture series on something that I didn't really know well, not anything about it, but I didn't really know how to do it, but I wanted to know. So I prepared this lecture, which is called Curating Architecture. So this is a side project from the exhibition. And I stopped on the way to Sydney in several places in Asia, Bangkok, Hong Kong, Shenzhen. I also went to Perth to give this talk. So this is really a work in progress because curating, in a way, is a work in progress. It's kind of in flux. Curating, especially in the field of architecture, is in the making. That's why I like it so much. There are no real rules how you become a curator. How do you curate? What is even a curating? This term constantly is expanding, and it has more and more meanings. So this, for example, I took this picture in a vitrine of one of the boutiques, one of the jewelry boutiques in New York along Madison Avenue, and it says right in the vitrine, collect, curate, create. So I thought this was very amusing because the word curate now applies to so many different fields, so many different meanings. It applies to design, art, cooking, fashion, jewelry design in this case, so many different things. But mainly what it means is to make choices, hopefully good choices. And this is the meaning of the word curate is coming from Latin, which means to take care, originally to take care of a collection in a museum, but now it has many different meanings. So this is a picture you're all familiar with. There is a kind of madness going on right now if you go to the most popular museums, especially places like the Louvre. It has over 9 million visitors a year now, so this is absolutely incredible. And a number of museums now have over 4, 5, and more million visitors, such museums as MoMA and the British Museum. So what it says is that the crowd, the people, are really hungry for new kind of experience, new kind of cultural experience. And it's important for curators to know that what do you do with all this interest? How do you create new projects? How do you create new engaged experience of going to a museum, going to an exhibition? So it's a constant kind of debate about what is a museum, what is an exhibition, what is it the curator supposed to be doing? Who is a curator? And these are a couple of well, I could say my heroes. And so this is Sergei Diaghilev. I would say he's definitely, he should be a hero of anybody who is in the world of art or curating. He lived a long time ago. He died in the 1920s, almost, I don't know, almost 90, more than 90 years ago. He was not really a curator. He was, you can say, an impresario. He really invented who he was. He was very famous for forming ballet russos. That was really the biggest project that he did. But he did more. He elevated the art of ballet, for example, to the level of an art form. And he formed many creative teams, such as musicians and conductors and the dancers and painters and sculptors. So together they created many different very new art forms, such as ballets and operas. He also curated a number of exhibitions. This is how he started his career. He did one of the exhibitions on Russian portraiture in 1905. And very soon after, he left Russia, and he was really his vision was to popularize Russian culture outside of Russia. And after the first Russian Revolution, he mainly lived outside of Russia, first in France, and then really in the rest of the world, taking his kind of entourage with him, visiting countries all around the world, creating this incredible projects. And he collaborated with people like Nijinsky. He really was one of the, you would say, creator of his work, him as a dancer. And he also collaborated with Picasso and Stravinsky, so many different people. And probably the most well-known curator today is Hans Ulrich Obrist, who is a relatively young curator with an interest in art and architecture as well. And he did many interesting projects. He is very well known for this project, which is called Do It, which is a set of instructions. And he started collaborating with many different very well-known artists from 1990s. And these artists, instead of creating an artwork, they would write kind of like a notation or a diagram for a museum on the other side of the world to really create their work. And now this is a compendium, so it's a collection of many of such artworks that could be recreated, not necessarily with the help of the artist, but locally with the museums. And so there were many dozens and dozens of exhibitions based on this kind of diagrams and descriptions of artworks that could be created locally. And but what is important here is that there are no real rules about curating. How do you curate? How do you become a curator? What do you need to make an exhibition? How do you start? So that's why he could be really very inspirational, because he started his career, not really a career, it was his interest in interviewing very significant cultural figures. And he really elevated the form of interview into a level of art form. And it is an interview that really allows to kind of map and trace the creative process. See, there is nothing really better than an interview that questions and answers than that. And so how do you start an exhibition? So he didn't even have that question. He just did it. Just like he named his book, Just Do It. So what did he do? He, for example, even as a teenager, he wanted to do an exhibition. And he invited 8 artists to the kitchen of his house where he lived. And together they did an exhibition in the kitchen. So it was small, but it attracted some interest. And it was done totally independent of any kind of institution and any kind of publication or and then, for example, another idea that he did, he was in Paris, staying at a hotel, and he decided to do an exhibition in his room, in his hotel room. And it became so popular that by the time this exhibition was over, 250 people would visit this exhibition on a daily basis. So you don't really need any kind of, rules. You can reinvent your own ways of doing it. And does the work of art need to be curated? And this is what Boris Groys, a German art critic, thinks. He says that in its origin, it seems the work of art is sick, helpless. In order to see it, viewers must be brought to it as visitors are brought to a bedridden patient by hospital staff. It is in fact no coincidence that the word curator is etymologically related to cure. Curating is curing. The process of curating cures the image's powerlessness, its incapacity to present itself. The artwork needs external help. The medicine that makes the image appear healthy, that makes the image literally appear, and so in the best light, is the exhibition. And we are here mainly talking about exhibiting architectural exhibitions. So one of the fundamental questions that you need to ask is not only what's an exhibition, and we don't really have an answer about that because this is something that gets reinvented, it's in constant flux. But what is architecture? And when you think about architecture, that's even a much bigger question because everybody has his or her own opinion about what's architecture and what's not architecture. And for example, Peter Eisenman, he says that architecture manifests how the society at any one time feels about itself. It problematizes and thus creates functions. It does not answer questions, it asks questions. It does not solve problems, it creates problems. So and it's very similar to what an exhibition is. So it's not about presenting a story, it's not about presenting what you know, it's always about questioning what you don't know. And we will see some other slides where in the next few slides you will see that an exhibition is not really sometimes a result of a particular research, but it could be a revelation itself, an experience in itself, and you can learn a lot from an exhibition, and your entire career may change because of that. So when you think about architecture, what is architecture? Sometimes I think you would think first not about conventional architecture, conventional thinking about what architecture is, but you would probably think about what architecture is not. So something very radical departure of what people associate architecture with. So for example, this was built just recently by Zaha Hadid, Haidar Aliyev Cultural Center in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. I've been to this building very soon, actually right before the opening, but when the building was already finished. And I would say that for me this was the most intense experience of experiencing architecture. And one of the reasons is because when you come to a building like this, especially I would say from the outside, you don't really recognize any familiar elements. And so this is very, very much in opposition to the show that is put up right now in Venice by Rem Koolhaas, which is called Fundamentals. And this is, if you go to this, see this building in person, you would not see any fundamental elements of architecture. You would not see any, from many angles, you would not see any steps or handrails or elements of facades. You would not recognize what is behind this very landscapey surface. It's totally defined, kind of redefines your expectations of what architecture is or what architecture may be. And obviously, what is a painting? Painting or a drawing is something that's really one of the most basic elements of any exhibition. When you go to an exhibition, that's what you expect to see. But what is a painting? And for example, here we see a painting by L. Lisitsky, which is called Prandrom, from 1923, over 90 years ago. And you can see how he totally reinvented the idea of a painting. So it's all of a sudden it became a three-dimensional kind of room-size environment where you would step in and feel almost floating in space. So imagine, and he says that the image is not a painting, but a structure around which we must circle, looking at it from all sides, peering down from above, investigating from below. And if a painting can be this, imagine what an exhibition could be. So it's all about questioning and kind of getting rid of all kinds of preconceptions and explore different possibilities. And from 1926, he said that his primary concern was in designing exhibitions. He saw himself primarily as exhibitions designer. And he used all kinds of techniques and all kinds of new materials. And that was really radical and revolutionary. And many people who visited his exhibitions, they would crowd them to the point that sometimes these exhibitions would have to be closed because of overcrowding. So on the left, you can see there is one exhibition which would have very dynamic elements. Everything would rotate and spin, and he used real movies in his displays. He used a lot of new materials such as chrome and mirrors, and with more traditional materials such as textiles and wood. And he would use three-dimensional objects that would be on display in as opposed to traditional ways of displaying before that would be just text and statistics. So that was a lot more kind of engaging. And on the right side, you can see how flat imageries were displayed in this kind of labyrinth of this scaffolding kind of and lattices that would really broaden your field of vision and surround this images 360 degrees to really immerse the viewer into this experience. And then there is a very similar exhibition on the left side here. So you can see that again the exhibition's display techniques become as important or maybe even more important than the content of the exhibition. And you will see later, or even on this slide, that maybe the content is not important at all, and it's all about exhibiting techniques. And you can see on the right side, Rita McBride, an artist, did almost direct 90-degree inversion of the scaffolding or lattices on the left side. And in her exhibition, that became really the subject matter of the exhibit. And this was 2x2 ceiling grid, just a regular 2x2 ceiling grid, which was placed in a gallery at height of waistline, more or less. So you couldn't even move in the gallery. You would have to crawl down and then kind of pop up into one of the squares, and then you couldn't move again. So it was all about slowing you down and giving kind of creating in a very different, very kind of slow environment, so you would pay attention to things that you normally wouldn't. And this is an example of an exhibition where there is no content, and we will see a number of such exhibitions. And this is the work of Frederick Kissler, City of Space, for Paris Expo 1925. And in this particular exhibition, again, you don't see the content. Originally, this was a kind of construction that would hold different elements of Austrian art, Austrian theater art, but very quickly it attracted a lot of attention to itself, to this construction, which later on was exhibited a number of times on itself, because it kind of symbolized this city in space, three-dimensional city, which is very kind of provocative on its own. So originally it was a framework that would hold different objects to, instead of presenting a content in a way of a narrative, this was more like a collage kind of construction. The last time it was exhibited in Venice in 2006 in Austrian Pavilion, and it was exhibited by itself because the structure itself had a lot of tension and a lot of potential. And Kiesler was very famous for his many experimental exhibitions, and this is his work for surrealist art. This is for Art of the Century Gallery in New York for Peggy Guggenheim, and you can see that he presented surrealist paintings and sculptures in a very dynamic and very kind of a fluid space with curved walls, where he really almost got rid of all the separation between the walls and the floor, and walls and the ceiling. So he curved his walls, and he exhibited many of the paintings taken outside of the frames, and introduced many different angles. So the viewer would be surrounded by this kind of 360 degrees field of vision. And also you can see the furniture, very sculptural elements. So you would feel in the space almost like being inside a sculpture. And this is a photo by Vogue magazine, so you can see that fashion stepped into gallery space. So this became almost like mainstream kind of interest. And here's another designer, Herbert Bauer, who was also a German designer, and he did a number of exhibitions in America. He did many exhibits at MoMA. So you can see how he also expanded the viewer's field of vision by presenting different images, photographs at variety of angles. And for example, there is another exhibition here where not only he introduced different angles, but he also introduced a particular sequence of going through the exhibition, which is not very different from the famous ramp at the Guggenheim by Frank Lloyd Wright, where you cannot really see the exhibit starting from the middle. You really have to start either from the end or from the beginning. And a sequence sometimes is very, very important. Because, well, sometimes there is a narrative that the designers or the curators want you to follow. And sometimes if you are surrounded by different items in a square room or rectangular room, then it's up to you. It's your choice how you explore the exhibition. This is a very important exhibition which took place in MoMA in 1932. So this was really the first architectural exhibition. There were never architectural exhibitions done before. And what seems to be very conventional here was really kind of groundbreaking. So this was the first time when architectural models were placed on pedestals like sculptures, and photographs of buildings were shown on walls like paintings. So it doesn't seem to be particularly innovative today, but it definitely was. So this was an exhibition done by Philip Johnson and Henry Russell Hitchcock. This exhibition was very important because it introduced and kind of validated a new style, international style. The exhibition traveled around the country to a number of places during 2 years. And for example, in Los Angeles, it was presented in a store, in a department store. So this were just, it was very unusual to show architecture in a museum setting, in a gallery setting. And architectural exhibitions, or any exhibitions, they can be very inspirational. What I mean is that, well, very often they become quite defining for especially younger people. After visiting an exhibition, a kid might decide to become a designer or a photographer or an architect. For example, the very famous Brazilian landscape designer Roberto Burle Marx, who is coming from kind of financial, very independent family. He visited one of the art exhibitions in Europe, and that made him to focus on artistic career. But this is an exhibition on the work of Emilia Ambas by Shigeru Ban. Shigeru Ban was a student at Cooper Union. He graduated in 1984. Emilia Ambas was his professor. And after going back to Japan a year later, in 1985, he invited Ambas to do his show at Axis Gallery in Tokyo. And he used transparent screens to separate different works in the exhibition. And that screen came in paper tubes, which he kept in his office. And when a year later he was working on another exhibition on the work of Alvar Aalto, he decided to experiment and use those tubes in his ways of displaying architecture. So there was, Alvar Aalto is very well known for using natural wood, and it would be prohibitively expensive to use wood in exhibition design. So Shigeru Ban went to a local paper factory, and he was told that he could in fact manufacture any kind of tubes, any diameter, any length, and he used that in his exhibition design. What is incredible is that after doing this exhibition, he started using paper tubes basically in most of his projects, and paper tube became really kind of a staple, very recognizable feature of his designs, to the point that if you use any in your present work, any kind of paper tubes, you will be accused as stealing the idea from Shigeru Ban. So Shigeru Ban became, he was given a Pritzker Prize this year. So he's the current Pritzker Prize winner. So this idea was really, you can say, was very rewarding, right? But it was a discovery through a particular exhibition project. And can architecture exhibition attract people? I was told by many people that, I would never go to an architectural exhibition. Well, this is what people say because they don't realize and envision how architecture can be exhibited. For a lot of people, an architectural exhibition is just a presentation of architectural drawings. But what's important is an idea. What exactly is the content? What is the premise? And this particular exhibition doesn't look very revolutionary at all. You can see exactly the same techniques that were used in 1932, many years ago, by Philip Johnson. So you can see some models on pedestals and photographs and renderings on the wall. So nothing is revolutionary, but the idea is quite. It caught attention of a lot of people in New York, because this was organized by Max Prodych about a year after the Twin Towers were destroyed in New York, and the idea was to create to create an exhibition that would showcase ideas and visions, new visions for new skyline in New York. So everybody wanted to see it, and in fact, when this exhibition was presented, it became the most popular exhibition in New York City. There were crowds of people trying to get in and see and kind of envision what the best designers of the world could envision. And what is a museum? And well, there is a quote. I don't know if I can find that. There is a building, a place. What is a museum? So a building, place, or institution devoted to the acquisition, conservation, study, exhibition, and educational interpretation of objects having scientific, historical, or artistic value. So it sounds very kind of boring and very it's not playful at all. And in fact, Paul Whaley, an artist, said in 1943, "I don't like museums. Many are admirable, but none are delightful." So how do you make a delightful museum? How do you invent a space or a setting for something that would be fun and amusing and popular? And for example, Renzo Piano said that a museum is something that where one can lose himself or herself. So I think this is one of the most successful museums by Lino Bobardi, a Brazilian, originally Italian architect, and she did this MASP Museum of Art in Sao Paulo in 1968, and you can see that she suspended the museum over the street, and you can see that how this museum could be used for concerts and street fairs in a very innovative way. So the street life in the city is kind of integrated into the museum. And notice the exterior of the museum. It doesn't have a wall, and there is a famous photograph here on the right side. You can see how creatively she presented very traditional painting collection right in the middle of the space, and the wall, which is the most traditional way of displaying paintings, that completely disappeared. So she used this concrete block to put up the glass, and the paintings were displayed on one side and annotations on the other side. So what she really created, and you don't see any people in the picture, but if you saw or imagine yourself going into this, you would probably see people in a very different way compared to how you would encounter people viewing exhibitions on a normal basis, because usually you come in and you see the backs of people reading annotations, but here people would encounter each other. So this became a very dynamic space. And this is a new museum by Fernando Romero, who did this museum for his father-in-law, one of the wealthiest people in the world. So I was in this museum a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not sure what I think about the overall kind of shape of the building. But once you go inside, there is a very interesting way of presenting traditional, painting. So you can see that there are frames used in displaying the pictures, and so you can see the picture at the same time from the front and from the back. And in the back, you don't just have an annotation or a story, but you have all kind of archaeology of a particular painting. So you can see when the painting was purchased, how much, and for how much, and what was the lot number, if there was an auction. And in fact, more people spent more time on the back reading different labels than admiring the fronts of the exhibit. So it was very interesting to see. This is a very, I would say, influential exhibition, Chronokhaos exhibit by Rem Koolhaas. This exhibit, I think, is very interesting for a couple of reasons. One reason is that the content was quite controversial, quite interesting. It was about preservation, so he presented two different views over what preservation should be. So one view was kind of authentic way, and the other view was kind of modernization, modernized restoration. And the second idea was to present this exhibition very playfully and very three-dimensionally. Despite the fact that he used only two-dimensional imagery, the experience of going into this exhibition is very three-dimensional, very architectural. So I really liked it a lot. There are very few elements. It's a very minimal kind of approach. All the imagery is flat, and yet the experience is very architectural. And it's important when you conceive an exhibition to come up with fun rules to play a particular game. So in this case, it was conceived like a city of streets, and you would go through the bands between the images, almost like going through streets of a thriving city, and every image would be presented like a city block or a building, with two conflicting views about preservation. And the same exhibition was shown in New York a year later. This was shown at the Kitchen Supply store right next to a new museum by Sana. And what he did, he made a very interesting change. He walked into the space, he drew a line across the entire space, dividing it in two. And what he did, he left one half totally untouched, and then remodeled and converted the other half into kind of wide gallery space. And this is a very ingenious device, because what he did is exactly, he showed it in practice, his view over preservation. So one way was to keep it as is, and the other way was to modernize it. And so he showed it in the design of the exhibition. And even the central columns, half was restored and the other half was left untreated. And if you were to visit this exhibition, I assure you that most people would not even pick it up, because you go to this exhibition and it's a totally three-dimensional experience. You don't really see the space divided in two. It's something that's very subtle, despite the fact that on this photograph it presents itself like a stark contrast. And here is another one of his exhibitions. It was shown at New Gallery. This was his own work, and this exhibition was presented and conceived more like a flea market. And he picked a number of his own projects, iconic projects that were overblown, and you could see them from the inside and from the outside, and this created this kind of mythic city. This was an enormous exhibition, about 2,000 square meters space, 10 meters high ceiling, and again this was an exhibition without walls as well, kind of mythic city within a city. This is an exhibition that I've seen in Buenos Aires very recently. So the idea here was to create a line of paintings, and you would go inside and see this kind of floating in space paintings without any annotations. If you wanted to read something about a particular painting, you would have to pick up one of the brochures. So this was a very immersive kind of experience, and the curators decided completely to erase architecture. So they achieved it by curving all corners from floor to walls, from wall to wall. So, and it was all painted white. You would walk over white floor, and everything was white, and you couldn't even look beyond every painting or every drawing. You would see absolutely nothing. It was like being in a cloud. So that was quite radical, and the idea again was to just erase architecture completely. And this is the work of Wolf Prix, Kub Himmelblau. This says Vienna, but this was first shown in Graz in 1980. These are his words. He says, we wanted to create architecture that would change like clouds. We wanted to create an architecture that bleeds, that breaks, that lights up and tears under stress, alive or dead. If cold, then cold as block of ice. If hot, then hot as a blazing wind. Architecture must blaze. Again, this is a question of what architecture. So this is a kind of performance piece that Kub Himmelblau started his career, but you can see that just 8 years later, his first architectural project in Vienna became quite literal, that blazing wing that covered law offices in Vienna in one of the historical buildings. And I interviewed him for one of my books, and he said that, his father was an architect, and he said that his father took him to an art museum, and he showed him this very famous Tower of Babel painting by Peter Bruegel. And he noticed at a very early age that the tower is unfinished. So he had this idea from early on to finish his kind of mythical ideal tower. And I think this should be really the goal of any architect, to finish this kind of Tower of Babel. And you can see one of his more recent projects. It looks amazingly similar to his own wing and to unfinished Tower of Babel. And an exhibition could be, so again, there is a question, what is an exhibition? Here is an exhibit that doesn't really exhibit anything. And we've seen a couple of those before. And this is the work of Jürgen Maurer H., a German architect, who did in 1995 this particular exhibition where he used heat-sensitive paint. And if you were to touch the surfaces in the gallery, you would leave marks, and you would see those marks kind of fading as the temperature would cool. The marks, the hand fingertips would disappear. So you could see the kind of traced movement of traces of people moving throughout the gallery. And he also did this guest book where he, for the first time, used data concealing patterns, and he used again the same technique to play with appearance and disappearance of what people could write in the book. But most importantly, he started exploring the ideas of these patterns, which you could find in envelopes and receipts of all kinds. And he really researched that whole subject, and these patterns became an inspiration for his architecture. So you can see that an exhibition was really, a very artistic exhibition became a discovery for him of his own kind of methods of how to develop his own architecture. So an exhibition can be really a laboratory for ideas in architecture. And then going back, again, he's using the same ideas. These are different numbers that make up that kind of pattern. So he's using the same idea for creating various spatial environments in exhibition scale. And this is a project by Zaha Hadid. This was an exhibition in Zurich of the work of Zaha Hadid and Russian supremacists. Her office scanned walls and the floor of the space and created this drawing that was applied, again, very two-dimensionally, to create a very three-dimensional environment, very three-dimensional kind of effect. So the gallery was really transformed into a drawing. So that was very striking, and yet the technique was very simple. It was just a two-dimensional drawing that made such an architectural experience. This is, I would say, one of the most memorable exhibitions from 2010 Venice Architecture Biennale. This is the Dutch Pavilion, and the curators wanted to show the unused space in the Netherlands in the buildings owned by the state. And how do you do that? It's a very boring kind of idea to document the unused space in the government buildings, but it was all about the presentation. So you would walk into the space of this pavilion and you would look up and you would see this multitude of the whole kind of ceiling filled with floating blue foam squares and rectangles and polygons. And only if you took the stair and look down, you would see a whole city floating that would represent those buildings throughout the Netherlands with the space unutilized. So this was a very kind of unusual, very emotional, and very memorable way of using exhibition as this kind of spatial device. And right next to it, the same year, the Belgian Pavilion presented another exhibition which explored the use in architecture of wear and tear, and they presented different fragments from older buildings as works of art and transformed their pavilion into a gallery. This is a French pavilion, which is a current exhibition in Venice Biennale, which is on view until end of November. And without going specifically into this particular projects, there were 4 projects presented by very well-known French curator Jean-Louis Cohen. What I liked about this particular presentation is that the fact that he decided to show only the projects that failed, modern projects that failed. And I think that's a very clever and very critical way of looking at projects and using exhibitions for that particular critical view, not just to show architecture that's successful, that succeeded, but in fact show something that failed and analyze it critically. This is the work of Robert Wilson, a very famous theater director and designer. And so we didn't talk about the influence of the theater on architectural exhibitions and architectural exhibition design, but the theater is obviously very, very significant. And if you look at his work, it's important to see that very often his visual imagery doesn't quite correspond with the sound, with the sounds, and it's a kind of collage that you have on stage, and I just wonder if that could be used as a device for an exhibition. But you again, an exhibition is not necessarily has to be educational. It's not about educating the viewer, but about inspiring the viewer. And going into an exhibition could be really a kind of immersive experience of being surrounded by sometimes elements that are not coordinated, are not related to each other. Like in Robert Wilson's performing pieces. And I just wanted to show you some of my own works. Again, this lecture is probably a little bit premature because I've done my own exhibitions just for a few years, and I'm going right now through kind of an expansion period, and I'm getting more and more works all around the world. But again, it helps me to kind of stand back and view critically at what others have done and kind of compare what I've done. This was an exhibition. This was in fact my very first exhibition in 2009. This was shown in Moscow at an architectural festival, and I was given this cubic space of 12 meters on each side, and totally given carte blanche. I could do anything in this space, and this was this was a festival which the theme of which was green architecture, new green technologies, ecological architecture. So the way it was presented, there were 12 projects that I selected, and each project was presented in a format of a film. So there were 4 very large projection screens, and on each side there would be 3 films, and each film was exactly 6 minutes. And this was again all immersive environment, and you would be surrounded by imagery, moving imagery from these 12 projects, and overall there was 72 minutes of films. These were very different scale projects from all over the world by well-known architects, and there was also a sound music by Philip Glass, which helped you to totally immerse in the space. And this is an exhibition which used very traditional techniques. This was a traveling exhibition. It went to Moscow, to the same space, and also to a number of architectural schools in the United States. So the name was Columbia Transformed. The exhibition was very special because I was trying to underline the fact that architecture in Columbia is in fact very, very different from the rest of the global architecture. So now global theme is a big issue. How do you distinguish architecture from one country to another? So Colombian architecture in fact is very distinctive because it's not entertaining the tourist, and it's not done for mainly for very wealthy clients. It is built mainly for very poor population in the poorest places in Colombian cities, and because of that, it generates continuously very large interest. And you can see in publications a lot about Colombian architecture. And this brings us to an exhibition which is by far the biggest exhibition that I have done. This is a traveling exhibition that traveled before coming to Sydney to 12 cities around the world. It went to 4 places in Europe and 4 places in North America, 4 places in South America, and now it finally came here. This is an exhibition on the work of Sydney's most prominent architect, Harry Sauder. So the idea was to really not just showcase his projects, but to concentrate on the collaborative efforts, on his collaborations between with a number of artists. And he, I would say, is an absolutely unique architect who collaborated with so many different architects and engineers and artists, and they were all very much integrated into his work, and his work is in fact influenced by the work of all those artists. And these are some pages from the book that I did on Harry Sauder. The book is called Life Work, published by Rizzoli and designed by Massimo Vignelli, very well-known designer who passed away just right after the book was finished. So the book came out in April of this year and now is available. So this exhibition started in the capital of Estonia, in Tallinn. This is an architectural museum there. Very large venue, over 500 square meters, the space. This is where the exhibition was first presented. So there are many different formats for exhibitions. They could be singular exhibits, or traveling exhibits, or biennales, triennales, different expos. What I like about the traveling exhibition is that there are no 2 venues that are exactly the same, but the content is. And so it gives you an opportunity to explore very different ideas spatially. And what's also very interesting is that if you make a mistake in one venue, you can always correct yourself in the next venue. So, for example, in the very first venue, I divided the space into separate rooms based on his different projects. There were houses in Sydney and towers in Sydney, and then there were major commissions outside of Sydney. And I already, when the exhibition was kind of experienced, I didn't like the idea that there was no kind of connection between different parts of the exhibition, and I corrected that in the next venue, which was Museum of Design and Applied Arts in Riga, the capital of Latvia. And the museum is located in the oldest stone building in the city. It's an 800 years old building occupying old former cathedral, as you can see, with a very tall ceiling. And here there was already an access, and the whole exhibition was spatially kind of unified. And interestingly, an exhibition could be also a platform for a political event, and which is totally not up to, it's out of hands of curators and designers. But Riga was, during this exhibition, was the capital of European Union, and they had a political event where 9 different prime ministers from Northern Europe convened. So you can see David Cameron here, and they are all surrounded by Harry Sauder's work. So one particular evening, there was a political debate with prime ministers in the space of the exhibition. And this was presented in a very conventional museum setting. So you can see this is in Sao Paulo. And this was also in Brazil, but in a very different setting. This was in a commercial mall where we got just enclosed space, which was totally converted into a white kind of white art gallery, and everything was painted white. So in a way, this was kind of negation, erasing architecture and suspending all the content within the space. And this was in the format of university. This is the last venue right before coming to Sydney in Buenos Aires. And that was a very vertical space. So you can see how the same content was presented in many different ways. And also in the displays, I had, kind of did the overimposition and juxtaposition of the work of artists and the work of Seiler to show a very direct link between his work and their work, because they used very similar geometry, and there is a very unusual, very strong connection between his work and the work of the artist. And here you can see some of the examples. So this is the painting Study for Vice Versa from 1943 by Joseph Albers, and you can see a very direct link between that work and one of the projects unrealized by Harry Seiler from 76-78. And there is another finished house from 1950 where you can see a juxtaposition of different volumes that create this visual tension, really inspired by a painting. And you can see here again one of the unrealized projects by Seiler. This is Frank Stella from his famous Protractor series from 68 to 1970. He created about 100 paintings based on repetition of a quadrant and a semicircle, and that was really the basis for many of the buildings by Seiler, such as Grosvenor Place, you probably know. And here's another sculptural piece by Norman Carlberg, who greatly affected Harry. And in fact, if you go to the exhibition, which is now at the City Museum of Sydney, you can see a letter that Harry Seiler, it's an original letter that Seiler wrote to Norman Carlberg, acknowledging the fact that you are that you made such an effect on what I am working on now. And he enclosed several photographs of his current project, which was never built, where his buildings would start getting into these shapes of quadrants extruded on a scale of architecture. So it's a very interesting connection. And the exhibition, when it came to Sydney, it changed its title. The original exhibition was called Harry Seiler, Architecture, Art and Collaborative Design, but it changed its title to Harry Seiler, Painting Toward Architecture, which is the title of his article from 1949, and that's the connection that he draws from architecture to art, where he's using examples of other architects' work. But even before that, a year before that, Henry Russell Hitchcock wrote a book with exactly the same title, Painting Toward Architecture, where he also analyzed the relationship between paintings and the work of modernist architects, such as, for example, the founder of the Bauhaus, Walter Gropius, whose own house was not really based on any historical precedents in architecture, but was based on such dynamic paintings as, for example, Boogie Woogie by Mondrian. So you can see very strong relation. And here you can see that this painting was really used as an inspiration for a number of earlier houses by Harry, and particularly his own house, the house where he lived with Penelope, his wife. And what I should also point out is that when I say painting toward architecture, that's really the idea was to transform. I think there is this is still, unfortunately, I don't have photographs from the exhibition. This is just the rendering, but this is how the exhibition looks like. There is before entering the exhibition, there is a wide construction here, and that's meant to be like a stretched canvas, white canvas that you break into. So it's almost like literally walking into a painting, and there is a very large stela outside of the gallery, and that's a hint of what kind of burst of colors to expect on the inside. And you walk in, and you see all these colors, and they are really the colors coming from this particular painting. But to point out is that this painting is on display. This is the painting, original painting by Theo van Doesburg, who was, this particular work was Saadler's favorite work of art. It was painted the year he was born in 1923, and when he was 70 years old, Penelope Saadler, through a dealer, found this painting and purchased it in early 90s and gave it to him as a birthday present. So when he passed away in 2006, she donated the painting to the National Gallery in Canberra, and this is where the painting is now. And it flew for this exhibition, and it's now in the gallery, right here, right over their house in Killara. And so those colors are represented in the gallery, and each color accentuates a particular collaboration between Harry and one of many artists. And you can see the works of this artist on display. Well, this is a slide about a show which is on display right now. This is in Latvian Pavilion in Venice until end of November. The reason I put it up here because I was asked to write an article about Soviet modernism for the catalog of Latvian Pavilion, and I told them that in comparison, if you compare modernist buildings from other former Soviet republics, Latvia really pales in comparison. It just didn't produce as many great works of architecture. And they said, well, that's fine. We just want an overall kind of critical view of what was done in the former entire Soviet Union. So when I visited the exhibition, it was quite interesting to see this particular design, this installation with many white papers, and then there is a question: is there is no modernism in Latvia with a question mark? So it was almost like criticism of my work as well. So saying that many pages, history pages, kind of remain unwritten and to be written. And so when you, as a participant, contribute your work, the way it can be interpreted by the curators is really beyond your control. So I just wanted to show that the work really needs a curator. This is what we started with. Does an exhibition need a curator? What does a curator do? So the same work of art or work of architecture can be displayed in such a way that it just flips its meaning, its premise, 180%. This is another exhibition which I am now just started working on. It's a famous house by Le Corbusier, Casa Curuchet. This house was the only house which was realized in the Americas by Le Corbusier, and I know the architect from New York and Atlanta, whose name is Tony Ames, and his work is really based on the work of Le Corbusier. So I proposed this idea to the director of Casa Curachet to show a kind of conversation between Ames and Le Corbusier to display his work, and his work is architectural and sculptural. So this will be displayed in the house to show a kind of conversation between artworks and the space. And this is really the last slide. This is the work of Dillers, Scafidio, and Renfro. This was a Swiss Expo pavilion in 2002 in Switzerland. So the reason I put it up here is that, well, sometimes an exhibition, and this was really designed and conceived as an exhibition space, sometimes it can be without anything to exhibit, with no really focus on anything. This was in fact totally out of focus, out of center. This was also a critique by the architects of very high definition world that we live in, and they decided to create an opposition to that kind of low definition world. And a lot of people didn't understand what was all about. It was a very wet and very kind of undefined space, and many would come up with different metaphors. So this pavilion was in fact used like a machine for making metaphors. But the reason I wanted to show you this slide is because, again, an exhibition could be all about the experience itself, not about learning about something, not about the content on display. So with that, this is it. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, provocative questions.
I'm thinking about, I think it was probably the second slide you showed, if I'm not